My father told me I could sleep under a bridge if I couldn't follow his rules. He said it standing in the doorway of the house I'd helped keep out of foreclosure. He called me ungrateful for refusing to chip in properly on a vacation I wasn't even going on. He told me my fancy degree and computer hobbies didn't impress him because real men work with their hands. He said I was a disappointment compared to my brother, who still borrowed money from him at 35. He ended the argument by pointing at the street and saying, "If you don't like it here, go live on the sidewalks with the rest of the losers." I picked up my suitcase, walked out, and drove back to the life he knew nothing about. 2 weeks later, the local news ran a story calling me the small-town girl who earns $17 million a year. My father nearly choked on his coffee when he realized who they were talking about. My name is Erin. I'm 32, and if you met me at the grocery store, you'd have no idea I'm the CEO of a cybersecurity company in Seattle that just went public. I wear jeans, drive a 5-year-old Subaru, and still have a handwritten budget on my fridge. I don't own designer anything except for the one blazer my assistant bullied me into for investor meetings. My parents still live in the same small town outside Spokane where I grew up. My dad, Mike, is a mechanic. My mom, Diane, works part-time at the library and pretends it's because she likes to stay busy, not because Dad never planned for retirement. I was the first in my family to go to college. My dad didn't understand my major, computer science mixed with a lot of math I loved and he distrusted. "You sure you don't want to do something practical?" he'd ask, wiping grease off his hands at the dinner table. "Nursing, teaching, hair. People always need that." "I promise there's a market for people who stop hackers," I'd say. He'd grunt. "As long as you're not living in my basement at 30, he'd say. "I'm not raising you twice." My brother, Luke, never got those lectures. He dropped out of community college after one semester, bounced between construction jobs and entrepreneurial schemes, and moved back home twice to get back on his feet. Dad called him a late bloomer. Mom called him our boy. I was the one who got called ungrateful if I questioned anything. By 25, I'd moved to Seattle, gotten my master's, and landed a job as a junior engineer at a security firm. My parents had a vague idea that I worked with computers and made good money now, whatever that meant to them. They didn't ask many questions. When the recession hit and Dad's shop started losing customers, I started sending money. At first it was, "Let me cover that surprise tax bill." Then, "I can help with the roof. You guys shouldn't put it on a credit card." Then, "Yes, I'll co-sign the refinance so you can get a lower rate." Every time, Dad acted like it was his due. "Family takes care of family," he'd say. "One day Luke will take care of you when you need it." Luke, who still forgot my birthday unless Facebook reminded him. My mom thanked me in whispers when Dad wasn't around. "You don't have to do this, honey," she'd say on the phone. "You should be saving for yourself." "I am," I'd say. "I can do both." And I could. My salary climbed. My stock options started to look less like lottery tickets and more like a reasonable bet. At 28, I left the security firm with 2 friends to build something of our own. We started from my apartment. Long nights, cheap pizza, code and coffee, and the kind of terror that only comes from knowing there's no one above you to fix it if you screw up. We built a system that could detect and isolate ransomware attacks in seconds instead of hours. The timing, awful for the world, perfect for us, lined up with a series of high-profile hacks. Companies that had brushed us off 6 months earlier were suddenly banging on our virtual door. Within 3 years, Sentinel Shield had major contracts, serious investors, and a board that wanted a face to put on their female-led, cutting-edge story. That face was mine. My compensation, salary plus stock grants, mainly the latter, passed 7 figures the year I turned 30. I did not tell my parents. Not because I wanted to hide anything, exactly. Because I knew how that would land in a house where Dad still called my work keyboard stuff and measured success in hours of sweat. They wouldn't understand the nuance of equity versus cash, my co-founder Jay said once. They'd just think you're a walking ATM. They already kind of do, I admitted. So I kept it light. When my parents asked how work was, I said busy and good. When they asked if I was comfortable, I said yes and changed the subject. I still sent money. The difference was, now it barely dented my accounts. Dad's respect did not increase with the size of my wire transfers. He still bragged about Luke's occasional big paydays. Kid made $2,000 flipping a car this week. He texted me with more pride than he'd ever shown when I told him we'd landed a Fortune 500 client. That's great, Dad, I'd reply, staring at an email about a multi-million-dollar renewal. Sentinel Shield went public in March. The board insisted on a bell-ringing ceremony. There were photos and a press release, and because of regulatory requirements, a compensation disclosure that made my stomach knot when I saw it. Total annual compensation, $17.2 million, mix of cash and stock. That's not real money, I told myself. Most of it's paper that can vanish if we screw up. Still, it was a number. A big one. I didn't send my parents the link. They found out anyway, but not before my dad told me to go live on the streets. It happened in June. I'd driven over for the weekend because my mom had hinted in her text that things were tense and it would be nice to have you here. Translation: Luke had moved back home again. Dad was stressed, and she needed another body to absorb the energy. When I pulled into the driveway, Luke's truck was in its usual spot, tailgate held up by a bungee cord. Inside, Mom hugged me like she hadn't seen me in years, even though it had only been a few months. "You look tired," she said. "Are they working you to death?" "We just hired 3 new engineers," I said. "If anything, I'm underworked." Dad grunted from his recliner, eyes on the TV. "Underworked and overpaid," he said. "That's the dream." "Nice to see you too," I said lightly. We did the usual dance. Small talk, my mom fussing over snacks, Luke breezing in with a "Hey, kiddo," like he hadn't just texted me for a little loan last week. It wasn't until dinner that the conversation turned. "So," Dad said, stabbing his meatloaf, "Luke and Jenna are thinking about taking the kids to Disneyland. Once in a lifetime, that kind of thing." "That's nice," I said. "The kids would love that." "Tickets are crazy expensive now," Mom added. "Flights too. We were thinking maybe the family could pitch in." Family, in this context, meant me. "I already send you money every month," I said gently. "Maybe this year isn't the year for big trips." Dad's fork clattered onto his plate. "There it is," he said. "The tightwad talk." "Mike," Mom murmured. "No, she needs to hear it," he snapped. "You sit in your fancy office in Seattle, acting like you're above us, but when it comes time to actually be there for family, you've always got an excuse." My jaw tightened. "I'm not above anyone," I said. "I just don't think I should be the automatic wallet every time Luke wants something." Luke bristled. "It's for my kids," he said. "Not me. You don't have any, so you don't get it." I took a breath. "I get it enough to know that if you can't afford something, sometimes you say no," I said. "I spent my entire 20s saying no so I could help keep this house." Dad's face darkened. "Don't you throw that in our face," he said. "We raised you, fed you, put you through school." "With loans," I said before I could stop myself. Mom flinched. Dad slammed his hand on the table. "You ungrateful little..." He stopped, forcing his tone back to something cold. "You think just because you send a little money you're better than us? You want to control how we live? You don't like it. You don't have to be here." "I'm here because Mom asked," I said. "Well, I'm unasking," he snapped. "This is my house. My rules. You don't want to help, you can get out. Go live on the damn streets with the rest of the homeless bums in Seattle. See how far your laptop gets you." Mom gasped. "Mike." "No," he said, standing. "I'm done walking on eggshells around Miss Big Shot. You don't respect this family. You don't respect me. Pack your stuff. You think you're so independent? Prove it." The words hit like physical blows. Not because I believed them, because they crystallized a truth I'd been avoiding. In his mind, no amount of success would ever outweigh the fact that I'd left the script he wrote for me. I looked at my mother, eyes wide and wet. At Luke, staring at his plate. At the man who taught me to ride a bike and now spoke to me like I was a stranger trespassing in his home. "Okay," I said quietly. I stood up, took my plate to the sink, rinsed it like it was any other night. Then I went to the guest room, gathered my overnight bag, and walked back through the living room. Dad pointed at the door. "Don't come crawling back when the world chews you up," he said, not looking away from the TV. "I won't," I said. I stepped out into the humid evening, the porch light casting a yellow pool on the cracked concrete. As I pulled away in my Subaru, heart pounding, one thought cut through the noise. He had no idea who he'd just told to go live on the streets. I drove the whole 4 hours back to Seattle without turning on the radio. Just the sound of the tires, the occasional truck passing, and my thoughts playing the conversation on loop. "If you don't like it here, go live on the damn streets." As if I were still 18 and asking for gas money, not 32, with a company worth more than his entire town. By the time I pulled into my apartment garage, I'd gone through every emotional stage: hurt, anger, guilt, back to anger, then something else. Relief. The door I'd been holding open for them in my head had just slammed shut. And I hadn't been the one to close it. When I walked into our office the next morning, the usual chaos of a startup in scaling mode wrapped around me like a familiar hoodie. Whiteboards covered in diagrams, half-empty coffee cups, someone arguing about Kubernetes in the corner. Jay, my co-founder and best friend since grad school, took one look at me and raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" she asked, shoving a pastry into my hand. "You have something worse than a production bug face." I sat on the edge of her desk. "My dad kicked me out," I said. "Told me to go live on the streets." Her mouth fell open. "Like, as a metaphor?" she asked. "Or did you actually have a suitcase in your hand at the time?" "Suitcase," I said. "Dinner table. Disneyland." I summarized the whole fight. The ask for money I wouldn't give, the old grievances, the line about raising me, the final directive. By the end, Jay looked like she wanted to personally drive to Spokane and fight him in the driveway. "You paid their taxes," she said. "You co-signed their refinance. He told you to go be homeless?" "Absolutely not." I shrugged, more tired than angry now. "He doesn't see it that way," I said. "To him, I'm the ungrateful kid who left and thinks she's better than them because she doesn't come home every holiday. The money I send is just what family does. Optional for them, required for me." "And your brother?" she asked. "Did he defend you at all?" I thought of Luke staring at his plate. "No," I said. "He let Dad do the talking." She exhaled through her teeth. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "At least for now. I'm done explaining my life to people who decided what it was before they knew." She studied me. "That sounds a lot like cutting them off," she said. "Are you ready for that?" "I'm ready to stop funding people who would watch me fall and call it proof they were right about me," I said. "If that's cutting them off, then yeah." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "For what it's worth," she said, "I'm proud of you." I decided then to pause the monthly transfers I'd been sending home. Not with some dramatic, "you don't deserve my money" text. Just silence. If Dad wanted to tell the world I was selfish, he could do it without my cash propping up his narrative. For about a week, nothing happened. I threw myself into work. We had a big deployment coming up. One of our largest clients had just renewed for a multi-year contract. Our lawyers were still untangling the post-IPO compliance spaghetti. There was always another meeting, another fireside chat, another panel they wanted me to sit on as the math teacher's daughter who made it big in cyber. Irony wasn't lost on me. One afternoon, our investor relations guy, Paul, stuck his head into my office. "You got a minute?" he asked. "Depends," I said. "Is it about a feature, a lawsuit, or a podcast?" "None of the above," he said. "It's a human interest piece. Local station. Your hometown." I frowned. "What?" "Some TV reporter in Spokane is doing a segment on hometown kids who made it," he said. "They found the IPO filing, did some digging, realized you graduated from their district. They want to interview you when you're up there next." "I'm not going up there next," I said. "And I have zero interest in being the prodigal daughter on the 6 o'clock news." Paul shifted. "I figured you'd say that," he said. "But there's also your high school. They reached out too. Apparently, they want to show girls in their STEM club that one of theirs is a CEO now. Could be cool. For them. That hit differently. I pictured my 17-year-old self in that crappy computer lab, the only girl in APCS, listening to boys make dumb jokes about sandwiches. I pictured some other girl sitting in that room now, wondering if she was insane to think she could build something bigger. Did the reporter already talk to my parents? I asked. Not yet, he said. They got your name from a guidance counselor, not from you. We can tell them no. Or we can set ground rules. Up to you. I thought about Dad's last words to me. Go live on the streets. I thought about how, in his head, I was still the kid who needed his roof. And I realized something. I'd spent years keeping my life small in his presence, so he wouldn't feel smaller by comparison. He hadn't returned the favor. Set the ground rules, I told Paul. No filming my family's house. No dragging my parents into it without permission. Focus on the school, the math teacher, the journey. I'll do a Zoom interview. No live shots in front of my childhood mailbox. You got it, he said, grinning. STEM Club is going to lose their minds. The interview happened 3 days later. The reporter was a woman in her 40s named Angela, who clearly did her homework. We talked about being a girl in tech, about starting Sentinel Shield with nothing but credit card limits and stubbornness, about the IPO. She asked about my family gently. They still live in Spokane, she said. They do, I said. We're complicated. But my mom taught me to love books, and my dad taught me to solve problems with my hands before I ever touched a keyboard. I'm grateful for both. It was honest without being sentimental. She asked about the compensation figure, the one everyone fixated on. The filings say you earned $17.2 million last year, she said. What goes through your head when you see that number? That most of it is theoretical, I said. Stock on paper that disappears if we mess up. And that I'd still be doing this even if the number were smaller. I like the work. It was the truth. It would also make a great pull quote. I accepted that. The segment aired the following week. I didn't watch it live. I was in a board meeting, arguing about headcount. My phone started buzzing halfway through. Texts from old classmates, a DM from my AP teacher, a photo from Jay of a TV in our break room with my face on it and the caption, Homegrown CEO earns $17 million. I muted it and finished the meeting. It wasn't until that night, sitting on my couch with takeout and Murphy's Seattle cousin drooling on my lap, I have a type, that I pulled it up online. There I was on screen. The chirpy host. The B-roll of my high school. Angela's voiceover. From this small spoken classroom to leading a cybersecurity company worth billions. They cut to my line about the number. SEC filings show she earned over $17 million last year. I winced hearing it out loud. But I also felt something like release. The secret was out. Not because I'd bragged, but because the world had a right to know certain facts when you ran a public company. The part of me conditioned to dim my light for Dad's comfort panicked. He's going to see this. He's going to rage. He's going to twist it. My phone buzzed. It was my mom. I stared at the name for a long moment before answering. Hi, Mom, I said. There was static, then her voice, shaky. I saw you, she said. On TV. At the store. They had it on all the screens. The cashier pointed and said, You know her? And I said, That's my girl. My throat tightened. How do you feel about it? I asked carefully. Proud, she said immediately. Terrified. Happy. Confused. $17 million is a lot of money, kiddo. It's not exactly a pile of cash on my kitchen table, I said. It's complicated. I know, she said. I don't understand it. But I do understand that you worked your tail off. And that your father was wrong. Silence hummed between us. Is he there? I asked. She hesitated. He's in the garage, she said. Pretending to rearrange tools. He watched the whole thing. Twice. Didn't say a word. I could picture it. Dad in his recliner, remote in hand, pretending he wasn't glued to the screen. Pride and resentment wrestling under his skin. Is he mad? I asked. He's shaken, she said. He kept saying, That can't be right. That's TV nonsense. Then he called Luke, asked if this computer thing was really that big. Luke said, Yeah, Dad. She's kind of a big deal. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. I'm not a big deal, I said. I'm just me. To them, she said softly, you're still just you. That's why he could say those things. He didn't know.
He knows now, I said.
He does, she agreed. And for the record, your room is still here. No one else has slept in it. Not even when Luke begged. Something warm spread in my chest. I appreciate that, I said. But I'm not coming back. Not to live. Maybe to visit. Sometimes. On my terms. I know, she said quietly. I called because I wanted you to hear I'm proud of you from someone in this house. He may never say it. As if cued, another call flashed on my screen.
Dad.
Mom, I said, heart speeding up. He's calling me. I figured he would, she said. You don't owe him an answer. But if you do pick up, don't let him make this about him. I promised I wouldn't. I hung up and let his call go to voicemail. Then a text came through. We need to talk. No greeting. No, I'm sorry. I stared at it, thumb hovering. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel an urge to rush into fixing, smoothing, explaining. I felt steady. He told me to go live on the streets. Now the world had casually informed him that I could probably buy the block he was standing on. The power balance had shifted. I didn't need to crow about it. I just needed to stop letting him pretend it hadn't happened. I didn't answer right away. Old me would have. Old me would have picked up on the first ring, heart pounding, ready to interpret every grunt and half apology as a breakthrough. Old me would have driven 4 hours the next weekend with a pie and a list of reasons why this misunderstanding didn't have to change anything. New me put the phone on the coffee table, sat back against the couch, and let Murphy climb into my lap. He texted again. Saw you on TV. We need to talk.
Call me.
The urge to obey, because that's what it was, not a request, flared and faded. I muted the thread. 2 days later, an email arrived. Subject: House. From Dad. The body was short. Your mother is upset. We shouldn't have said what we did. Things have been tight, and it got to me. That TV thing made it clear you're doing fine. Maybe you could come up some weekend, and we can talk like adults. Dad. If you squinted, you could almost mistake it for an apology. We shouldn't have said what we did. Not I was wrong. Not I hurt you. Not I'm sorry for telling you to live on the streets when you've been helping us stay in our house for years. But for my father, it was something. Jay read it over my shoulder at lunch. That's not nothing, she said. But it's not enough. I know, I said. So, what do you want? She asked. The question hung there. I wanted him to understand. To see me not as an ungrateful kid or a walking wallet, but as an adult who'd clawed her way into a life he'd never imagined for her. I also knew I might never get that. What I could get, what I could control, was this. Whether his access to me and to my money stayed unconditional. I wrote back that evening. Dad, I appreciate you reaching out. Things were said that can't be unsaid. I'm not interested in rehashing the fight, but I do need you to understand that telling your kid to go live on the streets is not something that gets erased because you don't like how it feels now. I'm glad you know I'm doing fine. I've been doing fine for a while. That's why I was able to help with taxes, the roof, the refinance. I did that because I care about Mom and about having you both in my life, not because I owed you a debt. Right now, I need space. If we talk, it needs to be when you're willing to see me as more than your disappointment or your emergency fund. Aaron. I hit send before I could soften it. A day passed.
2.
No response. On the 3rd day, Mom called. I read your email, she said quietly. He saw it too. He's thinking. Is he mad? I asked. He's proud and angry and scared, she said. Proud you're successful. Angry he didn't know. Scared because if you don't feel like you owe us anything, he doesn't know where that leaves him. The same place it leaves me, I said. 2 adults deciding what kind of relationship they want, not what they're obligated to have. She sighed. I always knew you'd fly farther than this town, she said. I just didn't realize how far away that would feel from here. It doesn't have to be far, I said. But I can't be close on terms that make me small. We stayed in that weird limbo for a few months. They didn't ask for money. I didn't offer it. Dad sent the occasional text, memes, photos of the dog, updates on Luke's kids. No more jabs about my work. No more demands. It was almost peaceful. Then the other shoe dropped. It was November when Mom called, voice tight. "Your father had a fall," she said. "He's okay. Just a broken wrist." But they found something on the x-ray. Spots on his lungs. My stomach clenched. "What kind of spots?" I asked.
"We don't know yet," she said.
"They want to run more tests. The insurance, well." She laughed, brittle. "You know how it is." I did. Teaching in public school had meant watching colleagues bankrupt themselves on medical bills. Running a company had meant negotiating our own employees' coverage and knowing exactly how much the system could squeeze a person. "Do you need me there?"
I asked.
There was a pause. "Yes," she said. "But not for money. For me." I went. The house smelled the same. Coffee, motor oil, whatever potpourri Mom had picked up at the church bazaar. Dad was quieter. Smaller, somehow, in his recliner, wrist in a brace, TV volume lower than usual. "You didn't have to come," he muttered when I walked in. "Yes, I did," I said. "You're my father." He looked at me like he'd been expecting sarcasm. It didn't come. That night, after Mom went to bed and Luke took the kids home, he and I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where he'd told me to go live on the streets. He cleared his throat. "Your mom says I owe you an apology," he said. "I agree with Mom," I replied. He stared at his hands for a moment. "I was out of line," he said. "You've helped more than I ever thought you would. More than I ever would have at your age." Back then, if my old man had come to me asking for money, I would have laughed him out of the room. "I wouldn't," I said. "That's the difference." He nodded. "I know," he said. "That's why I said what I said. Not because you're ungrateful. Because I was ashamed that my girl had to bail me out. Felt like I failed." "So you made it my fault," I said. He winced. "I did," he admitted. "Doesn't make it right. But that's what happened." Silence hummed between us. "I'm sorry, Aaron," he said finally. "For saying that. For acting like you owe me more than I ever gave you. For not getting it. What you've done." I exhaled slowly. It wasn't a perfect apology. It never would be. But it was more than I'd expected to hear in this lifetime. "I appreciate that," I said. "It doesn't erase it. But it matters." He nodded. "We saw the TV thing," he said. "Your mom cried." I didn't know what to say. "You told me to go live on the streets 2 weeks before," I said. He looked down at the table he'd refinished 3 times himself. "If I'd known," he began. "You shouldn't have had to," I cut in. "That's the point. You didn't know I made $17 million. But you knew I worked hard. You knew I helped when I could. You knew I was your kid. That should have been enough to keep go be homeless out of your mouth." He swallowed. "You're right," he said. We sat there for a while. "Are you okay?" I asked, nodding toward his chest. "Besides the wrist." He shrugged. "They don't know yet," he said. "Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's something. We'll find out. Do you want my help reviewing the bills?" I asked. "The insurance stuff?" He hesitated. "Would that make you feel like you owe us again?" he asked. The question surprised me. "Not if we're clear about where the line is," I said. "I'll help you navigate. I'll help Mom however long this takes. But I'm not going back to being the default ATM. We agree on that or I step back." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough," he said. "You're better at this stuff anyway." In that moment, I realized the revenge I'd already gotten, not the petty, TV-driven satisfaction of him seeing my number on a screen, but the deeper one. He needed me. Not as a wallet. Not as a scapegoat. As an adult who knew things he didn't. And for the first time, he acknowledged it without twisting it into an insult. Over the next year, we found a new equilibrium. I went to big appointments. I sat with Mom in waiting rooms while Dad got scans. I read billing codes and explained deductibles and called insurance reps who tried to talk over her. When they tried to stick him with an out-of-network charge that wasn't his fault, I unleashed my most polite CEO voice and watched them fold. I did not move back in. I did not resume monthly transfers. When Mom hinted about tight months, I offered specific help. I'll pay this bill directly. I'll send groceries via Instacart. No more blank checks. Luke called asking if, since you're rich now, I could help with his car. No, I said. Get a job that covers your life. Or buy a cheaper car. You've changed, he whined. I've stopped pretending I haven't, I said. Dad never called me a gold mine again. He started, slowly, saying things like, ask your sister, she knows how this stuff works, when Luke complained about finances. Mom rolled her eyes less and smiled more. We weren't a TV movie family. There was no big group hug in the rain. But there was respect where there had been only resentment. One night, after a long day of back-to-back meetings and an even longer phone call with an underwriter who didn't understand the difference between out-of-pocket and coinsurance, Dad and I sat on the back porch. The air smelled like pine and something grilling down the street. He cleared his throat. I still don't understand how you make that kind of money, he said. Feels fake. Like Monopoly. It kind of is, I said. Numbers on a screen that can go away. But the company's real. The work's real. He nodded. I told Luke, he said, if he wants help from now on, he can talk to you about a budget instead of me about a handout. He didn't like that. I'm shocked, I said dryly. Dad chuckled. I also told him, he added, that if he ever tells his kids their aunt isn't family because she said no, I'll smack him upside the head. That landed heavier. Thank you, I said. He looked at me. I was wrong, he said simply. About you. About what success looks like. I thought if my kids made more than me, it meant I'd failed. I see now it means maybe I did something right, even if I was an ass about it. You did a lot right, I said. You also did some things I won't be repeating if I ever have kids. He huffed. Fair, he said. We sat in companionable silence for a while. Do you ever think about that night? I asked. When you told me to go live on the streets? All the time, he said, not hesitating. I hear myself. I want to punch that version of me. You can't, I said. But you can keep this one in line. He nodded. I plan to, he said. Driving back to Seattle the next day, I realized something. My father had lost something that mattered far more to him than my checks. He'd lost the illusion that he held all the power in our relationship. He'd watched the world treat me as an authority, a success, someone to respect, and he couldn't stuff that knowledge back in the box, no matter how much he wanted to. He couldn't call me lazy or useless or ungrateful without sounding ridiculous, even to himself. He'd lost the right to set the terms of my life. And I had gained something I didn't even know I'd been missing. The ability to show up for my family from a place of choice, not obligation. To say yes when it felt right, no when it didn't, and trust that my worth wasn't up for debate in their kitchen. If you're listening to this and someone, parent, partner, boss, has ever told you that if you don't like their terms, you can go live on the streets, here's what I've learned. You don't convince them of your value by bleeding yourself dry on their behalf. You convince yourself of your value by building a life that doesn't depend on their approval. Sometimes, if you're lucky, they catch up. Sometimes they don't. But either way, the quietest, most devastating revenge isn't them seeing your bank balance. It's you finally understanding that their inability to see your worth says everything about them and nothing about you.